welcome to another episode of Part of the Narrative. It's me, your girl Mara, the marvelous, miraculous, the magnificent. See, I'm getting it. Practice makes perfect. Repetition, that's what you do. So, welcome to my channel. To those who are new, welcome back. To those who are awesome, my channel is crazy and chaotic because I am crazy and chaotic. I've gotten through my intro. I had to film this because the video that I'm editing right now is too goddamn long, okay? It's way too long. It was an hour and 20 minutes, and I'm like, nobody wants to sit here for that. So I decided to break the video up, thus this intro. Thanks for playing along. Y'all enjoy the video. Bye-sies.
And west from Japan and on over to Afghanistan?
I mean, I don't know if that's going to be any better.
All right, bit of historical setup on this story, too, before I get into it.
I love that they do other cultures and everything.
The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, Emirate never sounds right, but that's what the internet tells me, is a landlocked, expansive desert located at the crossroads of South Asia and Central Asia, a breathtakingly beautiful country with thousands of years of culture, history, tragedy, and, of course, a lot of war, especially in recent years. And maybe because of all the death associated with the war, a lot of ghosts. Some U.S. soldiers deployed in Afghanistan over the better part of the last 2 decades reportedly gained first-hand experience with the paranormal there. The following is a few of the many stories told by American military personnel who've all claimed to encounter entities in the same place in Afghanistan, Observation Post Rock. Observation Post Rock is located a few hundred meters southeast of what was once known as Patrol Base Hassan Abad in Afghanistan's Helmand province before the Taliban reclaimed it. Observation Post Rock was commonly referred to as just the Rock by American and British military personnel who used to serve there. It was chosen by NATO as an outpost due to the height of the mound, which offered an unparalleled vantage point over acres and acres of coveted poppy fields, all that opium below it. Observation Post is not actually a rock, though it resembles one. It's a roughly 30-foot tall dirt pile, and it's been there for a long, long time. It's seen a lot of fighting and death. Locals say the original structure of the rock dates all the way back to the time of Alexander the Great, over 23 centuries ago. Medieval arrow slits and the remains of fortified turrets have survived for years on the eastern flank. Another similar structure is visible in the distance to the south, once probably part of a supposed line of...
If my computer doesn't freak out, I'm really fascinated with history. We have so many structures and monuments that are just complete ruins. Like, piecing them together to figure out what they were is already very difficult, but now we've got computers to help with that. But there's still so much we don't know and can't find. Like, a lot of this stuff is just buried in the desert, and unless the desert wants to show it again, you're never going to see it. Some of the stuff's underwater. It's just absolutely insane that there's like a period of history that we just don't know about. Just nobody knows. There's estimates and guesstimates and all of that jazz, but it's just not enough information. So it's always really fascinating to me when I hear stories about the ruins or urban legends, things like that. They're just fascinating. Okay, this is long enough. We'll just keep going. Sorry. Just had to. Not gonna apologize. It's my channel. I do what I want.
History. No one seems to know at which point in history the rock began to be associated with the presence of evil spirits. But for decades now, if not for centuries, some locals have refused to even venture near the rock, fully believing it to be cursed. And now at least some U.S. soldiers who once served there share this belief. Time now for the tale of the ghosts of the rock. All sorts of paranormal activity has been reported at this location in recent years. At night, a large number of people have been reporting the strong sensation of feeling like something on the rock is watching you. Whispering voices are heard. Many have been specifically described as sounding Russian. Additionally, before withdrawing from the area in recent years, soldiers from the U.S., U.K., and elsewhere, and Marines from the U.S. have reported seeing everything from strange lights at night to odd voices heard inside a radio static to feeling highly unusual temperature drops and cold spots at all times of the year, even in the middle of the summer. And creepiest of all, the distinct feeling of breath on your skin. Hot breath, accompanied by the belief that someone is standing directly behind you, only to turn around and see no one. According to U.S. Marine Jose Herrera, the rock is definitely a conduit for spirit activity. He told a writer for the New York Times that when he was stationed there back in 2009, he experienced all this firsthand. He saw strange lights at night, heard unsettling voices coming through the static of his radio, and always felt like he was being watched. He also constantly smelled death, saying the smells were like something was dying. It was really bad at night, and it was like it came in whiffs or gusts. Dutch Perkins, another Marine formerly stationed on the Rock, once heard a disembodied voice speaking in Russian while he was on guard duty. He told the New York Times, "It was real faint at first,
Why in
but eventually
Russian?
sounded like someone was standing post with me." Former London Times journalist Tom Coughlin wrote that numerous Marines in the summer of 2009 he interviewed experienced the same things as Jose Herrera and Dutch Perkins. He said, "It first seemed like stress-induced hokum, but the more stories he heard, the more he came to believe that something truly is haunting the Rock." Some of the Marines who've experienced strange things in the Rock have acknowledged the effects of combat on the human mind, but they still believe those effects do not account for what they experienced. They believe fully that something paranormal is at play there. There are just so many stories. One night, an unidentified Marine and his partner were keeping the area secure in the middle of the night. They'd been sitting quietly for hours, growing bored and fighting off sleep, when suddenly, about 75 yards away, they saw what appeared to be a tall man approaching them. They put on their night vision goggles to see better and assess the threat. At first, the man looked human, but then when he turned his head towards the Marines, his eyes glowed impossibly bright. So much so that their goggles malfunctioned.
What?
The Mysterious Universe website posted a statement from the Marine. "Then the thing turned and looked right at me, with eyes so bright my night vision goggles started to burn out. Meaning it was so bright, it was burning the system. Usually done only by really fucking bright shit like the sun. So that freaked me
Like
out.
the sun?
Then I pulled my NVGs, my night vision goggles, off, and those
That's
eyes now
crazy.
look like neon red blood.
Oh my
Blood red
God.
and as bright as the sun. So this freaks me out, and I pull my machine gun over and train the thermal optic on it, onto it, and those eyes were so hot it started to burn out the optic. Same
Oh my
concept as
gosh.
before, but with heat. But his body was so cold he stood out from the background, which is really weird. I slowly loaded it, and then the eyes moved like he cocked his head at me and turned and walked off and was gone. I didn't say a word of this while we were
Now,
there.
I don't know why
but
that
then
was
when
the
I
most
circled since we'd gotten
terrifying
back.
picture for me.
In
It's just
2015,
like,
the Sci-Fi Network
no.
produced a paranormal witness
Well, it's
episode
creepy.
about this exact outpost and gathered more first-hand accounts. Paranormal Witness interviewed 4 men, 3 of whom spent 60 days at OP Rock in 2009, one transferring before their 60 days were up
Right.
directly because of paranormal terror. Corporal Jacob Lena, Corporal Adam Wilson, Lance Corporal Austin Hoyt, and Lance Corporal Damian Zolek. There were a few other Marines with them, and their unit was led by a man named Sergeant Green. Corporal Lena was second in command. They arrived at OP Rock to relieve some British soldiers from their duties, and before leaving, the British soldiers strongly warned them that if they were to dig up anything, put it back, unless they wanted to risk stirring up something they wanted no part of. Clearly, those soldiers had their own paranormal encounters.
I
The
understand.
Marines also learned that these soldiers had been taking care of a stray dog, which would now become their companion and lookout. It took almost no time for these Marines to begin to experience whatever had been terrorizing the British soldiers. On their very first night, Corporal Lena was stationed on a machine gun post when he started to hear some upsetting sounds coming through the static on his radio. Sounds he described as a crackling, gurgling noise that kept fading in and out. Lena called the main base to ask if they had sent a transmission.
Gurgling.
They had not. But his radio continued making noises. He turned up the volume to see if he could make out any words. He could clearly hear someone speaking, but the faint voice was not speaking in English. Lena replaced the batteries in the radio, hoped that would fix it. It did not. The disturbing sounds continued and kept him creeped out most of the night. The next day on the Rock, these Marines noticed that the British had dug defensive trenches around their observation post, but they were surprisingly shallow, so they decided to dig the trenches deeper. Lena found an engineering stake with Russian lettering on it when they started to do this. Lance Corporal Wilson found a hole in
said
the
put
rock.
it back.
Further digging revealed pieces of ceramic pots and cups. From the same hole, they pulled out a human femur bone. Feeling superstitious, they decided to put it back in the ground.
Put it all
The
back.
femur would not be the only bone they found. As they dug deeper and deeper, they found many human bones.
That's why they
And now
stopped
they realized
digging.
why the British soldiers had chosen not to dig their trenches any deeper,
Right.
and why they warned them about not disturbing anything. They would come to believe that
There's too many
disturbing
bodies
this
down there.
resting place led to an increase in the area's paranormal activity. Lance Corporal Austin Hoyt was on guard duty about 2 weeks afterwards, when now he suddenly got the feeling he was being watched. The same night, everyone was woken up by a terrified scream piercing the still night air. They searched the entire camp but found nothing for
Yeah,
the first several
I'm
minutes.
creeped out.
But then Hoyt saw a figure running off in the distance. At least he thought he did. When he used thermal imaging equipment, he saw nothing. He assumed his mind had been playing tricks on him. The next morning, he and his fellow Marines searched the area for footprints or some sign that someone was there in the night, but found nothing. When later reflecting on this incident, combined with so many other reported activity, Hoyt would come to believe he had definitely seen a ghost. Another night, around this time, Lance Corporal Zolik was on guard duty when a sudden cold chill passed through him, even though he had just been very hot and sweaty. He then felt warm breath on the side of his face and heard a voice whisper into his ear. Of course, when he turned towards it, he was completely alone. And his paranormal encounter was not over. Soon after feeling that hot breath and hearing a whisper, he heard a crunching sound, as if someone were walking on the rocky ground above him. He thought it might be an enemy soldier and ran around to catch someone on top of the post, but again, no one was there. Zolik now stood on top of their base, used a thermal scope to survey the area. He saw no one around the rock until his scope did finally actually land on a figure, a man with his fist balled up in a threatening gesture. Zolik almost shot the man, but first wanted to take a moment, get confirmation he was in fact an enemy. Before he could make confirmation, the figure vanished. Freaked out, now he sat back down and immediately felt the same cold chill from before come over him. He didn't know what to do next.
These sound effects.
Frustrated that on top of everything he was dealing
They
with
do a
during
great
his
job.
deployment, now he had to also deal with menacing spirits. Zolik told Lance Corporal Hoyt about what he saw, and Hoyt didn't believe him. Not at first. Zolik said, "It's a lonely feeling knowing that this place is haunted and you're the only one that sees these things or hears these things. I'd rather take my chances against something I could actually, fight against."
Right.
Zolik requested a transfer after this incident.
Right.
The others didn't know what to think. They still didn't believe him, but their opinions would soon change. A few days after Zolik left the rock, Lena was on a machine gun post one night when around 1:30 a.m.
really creeped
that
out,
dog began barking at
oof.
something. He used his night vision goggles to look out into the distance and clearly saw the figure of a man standing outside their post. He said it was very unnerving. "I felt like this figure was staring right at me and knew I was staring right back at it." Yes, it. Not him, it. He now used his thermal optics to get a better look and saw nothing. So he switched back over to night vision and saw the figure of the man again.
Oh,
The man
no.
had moved about 100 meters closer to his position in just a few
Not
seconds.
closer.
Not possible for a real person. Again, when he looked, nothing showed up on thermal optics. He was looking at what seemed to be the figure of a man who could move at an impossible speed and also a man who emitted no heat, like a dead man. Lena now switched to goggles a third time, and before he could look at the figure again, he felt a double tap on his shoulder, the distinct sign that their unit used to indicate when one of them was coming up behind someone.
Ooh,
But when he
thank
turned
God.
around, no one was there.
No.
Lena now realized that Zolik had been telling the truth all along. He wasn't sure what to do because he couldn't say that he was seeing ghosts.
I was
of
really
everyone,
hoping it
thinking
was
he as
somebody he
crazy
knew.
as he previously thought Zolik was.
Hell
So he
no.
hoped it would happen to a third person and that they'd come forward, and then when they did, he could share his story as well.
Right.
And this is exactly what would happen just a few days later.
Oh my God.
Now Hoyt was on duty in the middle of the night, and a man named Corporal Smith was at a different post nearby when Hoyt started to have experiences he couldn't explain. First, he heard the distinct sound of footsteps behind him. He spun around, saw no one, tried to tell himself it had just been the sound of his own boots on the loose gravel echoing a bit into the night. But then the dog began growling, snarling, staring off into the distance like it saw someone. So now he uses his thermal optics to locate what the dog is growling at, but only can see the dog and some sleeping Marines in his unit. He checks in with Corporal Smith, who tells him he hadn't seen anything unusual. Hoyt sits down, tries to shake it all off, but again, hears more crunching footsteps behind him. They seem to come from no one. He feels like he's going crazy. And he definitely hears someone else walking around. As he thinks about how this could be possible, he feels someone breathing on his neck, hot breath, but again coming from no one. Now he
Hot
is sure that a
breath.
spirit,
No, that's
or more than one
nasty.
spirit, is
Get up
messing with
off
him.
me.
He'll later say, "I couldn't see anything. It was like my eyes were just lying to me, because every other sense in my body was saying, nope, there's something here." So now Hoyt believes Zolik's story too. Lena and him both do, and soon afterwards, yet another Marine will join in on their belief.
Right.
Lance Corporal Wilson was on machine gun duty a different night when he felt a cold chill go through him and heard a voice whispering faintly. The voice spoke several times and sounded Russian. It grew louder and louder, with Wilson describing the phenomena as like the person was actually touching me in the ear.
Ew.
Wilson became terrified. Finally, Wilson sat down with Lena and Hoyt, and they all talked about what they'd seen and heard. And they agreed that Zolik was right all along. They couldn't come up with any other explanation for what had happened to them than the paranormal. Only Lance Corporal Smith still hadn't experienced anything unusual. He still wasn't buying it. He told them the sun had fried their brains. But he too would experience something unexplainable.
Damn.
Wilson was on duty their last night at the Rock, terrified he would hear the whispers again. Whispers would end up seeming like the least of his worries for a
He
few
said they
moments.
last day.
All of a sudden,
They
he heard
last
machine
night.
gun fire right next to his ear. Everyone woke up
Shit.
assuming they were being attacked. They threw on their gear, readied their weapons. Lena came back to check on Wilson, who was in distress because of an incredibly loud noise that had gone off right next to his ear. But Lena saw that no rounds had been fired from his gun. Everyone then heard a loud whoosh, as if a rocket had just passed over them. They checked every trench to try and find where the attack was coming from. No one was there, but the sound of phantom gunfire continued. Wilson continued to hear loud gunshots right next to his ear. Suddenly, after a few minutes of complete chaos, everything stopped and was eerily silent. Lance Corporal Smith was furious they couldn't find whoever tried to kill them. In his frustration, he took off his helmet and threw it down to the ground. But did anyone try to kill them? There was no sign that any bullets or any other projectiles or explosives had touched the rock that night. Were spirits messing with them? Were they hearing a phantom battle? Smith still wouldn't admit belief now in the paranormal, but he definitely seemed rattled by the whole incident and couldn't rationally explain it. Bless you. The next day, all these men were ordered to leave OP Rock. Sadly, some tragedy would soon follow some of them. Shortly after they left, Lance Corporal Smith was killed on a secure base by a rogue bullet, and several other men they served with at the Rock died. Lance Corporal Diggs, another Marine in their unit, died in an IED blast. Lance Corporal Parker was killed during a routine patrol. Corporal Lena said, "You thought you were done with OP Rock when you left, but in some ways, it wasn't done with you." Per a 2020 New York Times article, the area is now occupied by Taliban insurgents. No word on what they might be hearing, seeing, and feeling.
I was so creeped out by the story because when I was putting together my episode, I don't want to give too much away because it's a story that I'm sure I will eventually share.
Yeah.
But about soldiers.
So not when you were putting together this episode, but
No.
another one.
Yeah,
Gotcha,
just like something I was like, on the fence about.
Yeah.
It's a pretty gnarly story, so I feel a little like on the fence about whether it's appropriate to share.
Oh, okay.
But these soldiers are in Afghanistan, and one
I'm
soldier
telling you, we're
is
hearing some
communicating
stories
with,
right now.
like a former Taliban member, whatever.
Yeah.
And basically they're like
Of
stuck in a
the
spot
people
together.
over in
and he's like, "Oh,
Afghanistan
tell me,
and
like,
stuff
some
that they
folklore."
encountered.
And then
hearing
whatever
some
he
stories.
shares with him, whatever the Afghani man shares with the U.S. soldier, it is not done with him. And it is like a very creepy story. And it like seems to have infiltrated like an entire group of men.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is creepy.
But it's so similar in that
Similar,
way, yeah.
Oh, I've just 3 pictures.
Okay.
One is a machine gun outpost at Observation Post Rock back in 2009. I mean, there wasn't any like nighttime, they're probably not supposed to take a lot of pictures of this at the time.
No.
A group of Marines relaxing in their living area atop Observation Post Rock, same year. Is this next one?
I like the guy standing up who's like being
I know,
silly.
he's being weird. He's being, goofing around. Me too.
He looks like our niece.
Yeah. And then one more picture. I don't know who this was.
Oh,
I just want
can
you to
you
see
like
something
warn somebody?
really creepy. Isn't that disturbing?
Yeah, what is that?
It's a random thumbnail from that Netflix series Haunted, which I like. I just wanted to show you something creepier than what I've been able to find associated with the story visually. Isn't that so disturbing?
It is.
That's so creepy.
Yeah.
Get rid of it.
All right.
I don't want to see it anymore.
Okay, good. Ooh, you weren't
Jeez.
kidding. You had long stories.
I know.
Right.
Wow. All right. Well,
Long as
hopefully I can wrap it
hell.
up quick.
Oh, no, we got time.
Wow, that was really, really intense. I wonder
It
what's the deal
was.
with it Russians? Like, why?
Well, there was more information. Again, because there's already such a longer story.
Because of the mercenaries?
But they, it sounded like there had been Russians stationed at that same places had like soldiers from various wars in Afghanistan for so long.
Yeah.
And there was a rumor, not totally substantiated, that a bunch of
started
Russian
in the
soldiers
middle.
were captured, a bunch of POWs, and then executed in mass on that same place,
Oh.
on the rock,
'Cause
in that same place.
I kept bumping on that. I was like, but why? Like, why all these Russians? What's that
Right.
about?
That was the rumor for some locals, that a bunch of, many years before, I don't have the exact years memorized as far as when there was this war with between the Afghanis and the Russians. I want to say back in the 70s maybe. But anyway, long kind of series of battles. And at that time, a bunch of guys, were, captured on the rock. And then instead of, released back to Russia or whatever, taken to a proper POW camp, they just killed them all.
Well, that would explain why it would be so haunted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Death and destruction.
Yep. Exactly.
Just like being a soldier deployed anywhere has to be so nerve-wracking, like especially in active combat, you know.
Oh my God.
And then just adding
Can't
that
imagine.
element in, it's like, what the fuck?
I know. Like the
It
one
seems
guy
so
Zolik said.
unfair.
It does seem unfair that you're worried
It's
about
so
these
unfair.
hostiles, you know, these other people that want to kill you or trying to kill you.
Now you gotta worry
and
about
you're-
ghosts.
I mean, again, never served, but it's like I'd imagine you'd be so tense, you know, because
Yeah.
of that all the time and dealing with a lot of stress. And then if you also are dealing with some kind of paranormal activity in the exact same place, it does just seem like Zolik alluded to just as unfair.
Yeah, unfair. And you probably just feel like you're going crazy.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Like, is this real? Is this not real? Like, is this am I going through like
PTSD?
PTSD, even though I'm still here, so it's not
Sure.
quite PTSD, but just like, my God.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine adding layer upon layer of fear, stress, anxiety on top of what's already there.
Totally.
Right?
La la la.